To be a welcome participant in any culture or community, and for people to be willing to talk with you, sometimes at great length and sometimes about sensitive or even intimate topics, you have to meet and get to know them. You can have a wealth of knowledge about the culture and its language, but if you don't build relationships with your research participants, it will be difficult to find real meaning in your research. Entree is the way anthropologists get situated in their field community, how they are introduced, how they get to know people, how they come to be included in participant observation. Often an anthropologist will get to know someone who is respected in, or at least familiar with, the target community. Once they have entree, they will work on building rapport.
My name is Jonas Plan. I'm an environmental anthropologist studying fisheries and fishermen in Newfoundland. I came here because I had met Tony, one of the fishermen here, in one conference. It made sense to visit him and see maybe if this place would work out.
Then Jonas was around and certainly doing interviews with me and with other fishermen, and he said he'd like to go out and experience, fishing both lobster and crab. And I said, boy, and it's an extra help, right? So I said, I'm game for it. So he came out with us.
Rapport fundamentally means getting along. Do the people you like to work with like you? Do they trust you? Will they enjoy having you hanging around and asking questions? This goes beyond social skill. Sometimes, even with entree, there may be significant challenges to building rapport. Take, for instance, an interview I did in the year 2000 at an orphanage in central Java. I was in Indonesia for exploratory research into the long-term psychosocial outcomes of childhood exposure to traumatic state violence. Along with my Indonesian colleagues, the psychiatrist Dr. Mahara Gusno and community mental health researcher Ninik Supartini, I had begun to visit Javanese orphanages for children impacted by the recent conflicts in what was then East Timor, now known as Timor-Leste. One participant was in her early teens and had come to the orphanage via a refugee camp after her village had been razed to the ground. She knew Dr. Mahara and had spoken to him freely, but when I joined the interview, she seemed too uncomfortable to speak at all, let alone answer questions. Instead, she stared blankly, broke into panicked laughter that verged on tears, and covered her face.
She is worried. She has said that she is worried that through this shooting, then the information will be sent to East Timor. She's afraid that if the information gets through to Timor, then she will be called back to East Timor.
Yeah. Good reason why she doesn't want to talk to us. She's afraid that it's going to hurt her. Mm-hmm. So that's, we either have to reassure her or not go to the interview. If she's not comfortable, then it's probably not the right thing to do.
At first I was confused as to why I seemed to frighten her. Later I learned from Indonesian activists that some children have been subject to violence at the hands of white male mercenaries from Australia and New Zealand. Presumably, she associated me with these men. Given this, it was impossible for me to establish rapport and gain her trust. We stopped the interview, and out of respect for her experiences, I didn't pursue research with her or other children at the orphanage.
For some anthropologists, entree and rapport comes fairly easily. For others, integration into the fieldwork community is more challenging. Some even experience culture shock, or the disorientation, anxiety, and even depression experienced when immersed in a new social and cultural setting where beliefs and behaviors may be strikingly different from those of one's home community. Culture shock can be somewhat alleviated by doing preliminary research, visiting the site ahead of time, and staying connected to your own community back home. Most importantly, adjustment time at the site should be planned for before fieldwork even begins. Addressing culture shock is crucial to the production of ethnographic knowledge, as cultural animosity will automatically foreclose an anthropological approach. Working through the reasons for culture shock can even become its own form of ethnographic data. In a classic example, anthropologist Jean Briggs experienced culture shock when living among the Utku Inuit. While she was struggling to adapt, hoarding food from home, losing her temper, and battling despondency, she found her rapport with her host family quickly deteriorating.
Morally, culturally, there was nothing worse than outward displays of emotion. This became apparent to Briggs not through observing like a detached scientist, but through her own emotional behaviour. She had trouble adapting to the cold and struggled with the language. As winter came and the temperature dropped to -50, she became irritated. She cried occasionally and let out occasional bursts of profanity. She interfered with Ukku norms in ways she shouldn't have and slowly became marginalised, slipping into months of depression.
She tried to understand and adapt to cultural norms, and her negotiation of cross-cultural emotional expression and expectations became the basis of her ethnography. Ironically, if you become truly immersed in the culture you're studying, you may then experience reverse culture shock upon return to your home culture, where values, beliefs, or behaviors you once took for granted now seem relative and perhaps even upsetting or undesirable.
Whether developed with the anthropologist after an extended stay in the field, or in the case of more autoethnographic work, pre-existing the ethnographic study, long-term relationships with ethnographic participants can be both personally rewarding and deeply illuminating with regards to the lived experience of culture. In my years of research and fieldwork in Bali, I have had the opportunity to make really close friends with some of my research participants. One of them is Gusti Ayu. I have known and worked with Gusti since 1997, and my decades-long friendship with her taught me much about culture, difference, resilience, and the ethnographic project.
Boleh kita melakukan wawancara dengan Gusti Ayu tadi? Boleh saya pertanyakan, bagaimana keadaan Gusti dari setahun yang lalu sampai sekarang?
Sekarang lebih tenang dan lebih senang, lebih happy.
Kenapa?
Udah dapat kerja, punya pekerjaan di sini, punya teman banyak.
Ethnographic methods have continued to move toward greater proximity, familiarity, and collaboration. There have been some overarching and loosely chronological changes in how cultural anthropologists approach ethnography, both with regards to their relationships in the field and their analysis of their data, from a more distanced, totalizing cultural interpretation to a person-centered understanding of the experience of culture, to using that understanding for real-world impact. This has also shifted the dynamics between the anthropologists and the people they're studying. While once commonly called informants or subjects, cultural insiders in the field are now thought of as participants, collaborators, or even one and the same as the anthropologist. Gaining popularity in the 1960s and 70s, and primarily associated with anthropologist Clifford Geertz, interpretive or symbolic anthropology analyzes how reality is shaped and guided by cultural symbols. Culture, in essence, becomes a text to be decoded by an outsider for pattern and meaning.
Rather than focusing on esoteric theory or distance symbolic analysis, person-centered ethnographies hone in on lived experience to understand how it feels to be an individual living in a particular culture at a particular time. Influenced by psychoanalysis, this is the type of research I have conducted for decades. It involves frequent, open-ended interviews with a small number of people on a range of topics over months or even years. This allows for a thorough exploration of areas of interest, including some that may even feel too personal or sensitive to address at the beginning. A person-centered approach is explicitly experience-near, meaning it focuses on how people being interviewed experience and understand their own lives and culture. A person-centered approach can help bridge cultural differences between anthropologists and the people they are studying, if they in fact come from different cultures. Increasingly, anthropologists conduct research from their position of cultural insider, producing ethnographies about their own people. The autoethnographic style highlights personal experiences in self-narration and accounts of culture, turning the fieldwork lens on the self within a social context. A Applied anthropology uses ethnography for practical purposes to address real-world challenges, such as activism and social justice movements, resource management, or public health programs. This is particularly promising when anthropologists work with ethnographic participants to create strategies that are relevant and effective for local communities.
Shanti Parikh, Associate Professor of Anthropology and African American Studies. So I have two projects that I'm pursuing right now. One is at the final stages of a manuscript on Black masculinity in East Africa, and that's looking from the colonial era and how colonialism interacted with Black masculinity till today. And then I have another project that's looking at HIV hotspots and specifically mobility and commercial sex work. One of the oldest sex work towns in East Africa happens to be in the area that I do research in. It's in eastern central Uganda along the Trans-Africa Highway. And so since then, the economic base for this town has been commercial sex work. Along the Trans-Africa Highway, there are different truck stops that have emerged, as we call them, comfort spots. So they offer men a place to park their truck, a place to buy food, spend the night, buy necessities, and also buy intimacy. So eventually, hopefully, we'll tap into key people in those sites and do mobile technology interventions and able to get people into care, to get people tested. They've been traditional interviews with sex workers, and we've done participant observation at bars and places where they transact sex work. We've also used a lot of what we call community engaged or participatory techniques. And those are where you get a group of sex workers and customers and you have them doing activities. So again, we're hoping to use these networks to be able to benefit their lives. It's difficult for them to access testing, and it's very difficult for them to stay on HIV care if they are HIV positive. And that's where the mobile technology apps that we're hoping to develop with these communities. So all the research we've been doing is very much sort of led by the group of sex workers that we're working with, as well as the customer.
Through ongoing discussions and self-reflections, anthropologists have tried to get even closer to the perspectives of a cultural insider and work to ensure their work is accessible and relevant to the communities they work with.
Above all, writing, but also photography and ethnographic film have been the primary genres in cultural anthropology for presenting ethnographic research. Recent contemporary work has been pushing the boundaries, and anthropologists now present their results not only in articles and in books, but through drawing and graphic anthropology, sensory ethnographies such as soundscapes, multimodal film or video, installations, interactive web documentaries, and crossover feature-length films.
There is a diversity of topical interests in cultural anthropology, a multitude of ways to engage with different cultures and communities, and an exciting array of contemporary modalities that can be used to present your findings and even have a real-world impact. While the approach you take in the field and to your data analysis will greatly impact your conclusions, the basic methodology in anthropology stays the same: observing and participating in a culture, getting to know people, talking with them about issues that matter to both of you so that you may understand their point of view, and documenting and presenting your findings. If you were to develop an ethnographic project, what would you study, what approach would you choose, and why? How would you gain entree to the community you'd like to study? How might you build rapport? Thank you for watching. If you'd like to explore the topic of ethnographic methods further, here are some great resources in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get your regular dose of AnthroDorphins.